It's with great pleasure that we have Maria here, and it's actually the first time that this play is being read within the United States. So it's a great honor to have her here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about the translation process that you had from the German production to the Canadian production that you're working on now, and sort of the thought process behind the changes that you made? What you saw just now is an excerpt from the German version of the play, but there's also a more Canadian version that Maria can tell you about.
Yes, there is a more Canadian version. So what happened with Brandung is that I started translating it a year and a half ago in Canada, and since I'm working at the Tarragon Theatre, they have this huge play development program. So what they offer you as a playwright is workshops. So you invite actors and they tell you what they don't understand about your play. And then you work on that, and then you invite new actors and they tell you what they don't understand now. And with Brandung, of course, and I think you might have realized this, there are many things that one does not understand. Because they do not necessarily serve the action, or because they're very subjective from that point of their first-person narrator, of course. So things like, Vlado is older than me. It doesn't push the action forward in any way. So in Canada they said, why do you need it? What's the point of this? And of course there is no point. Like, the only justification I have is that I, as a playwright, wanted to say it at that particular point in time. And I think that's one side of the translation process. Not only that, from that literal translation where it was just sort of word-to-word translated, people said, well, these are parts that in theatre an audience would not cherish would cherish in a different way than a German audience, because a German audience is so much used to being confused by theatre. Why don't you just give answers? Why don't you just explain? And it makes perfect sense. Why not write a play that makes sense? And the other thing is that Canadian directors work, and I think directors generally in North America work differently than directors in Germany would work. So the idea to work with objectives and intentions was new to me. And so what we did is that we approached the play through the standpoint of the actors and said, well, what are the intentions? What are the objectives here? Why not bundle it differently? Because what you've seen today, and that's sort of why we went with a more German version, because this is the Goethe Institute and because it's interesting to see that, is what you've seen is that people jump around, right? It's like, at one point, Mariana is the German, and then Omar is the German. In the Canadian version, only the actress who plays Sophia would be the German. And Sophia would, like, throughout the play, be the one who's opposing the eye narrator and Vlado. She's the person who goes against them, who's like, come on, you gotta wake up, you gotta move, you gotta find Carla, stop talking about the sea and the ocean, stop being so very romantic, our friend's missing. So for the actress to have a continual journey throughout the play, even though she was playing different characters, seemed very important, and I believe it truly is important. So the translation, to summarize it, has worked through the lens of saying, well, how does North American theatre work, and what is it that people do work with? Which are their tools? What do I as a player need to give them so that they can actually work on my play? And then, of course, there are these minor things which are cultural things. For example, the Russian Quarter. In Germany, everybody says, okay, like, the town has a Russian Quarter, that's the high-rises, that's where the people who in the 90s came to Germany were sent, right? Because there's this huge wave of Russians who had German heritage who were allowed into Germany at one point. Well, that's, of course, something that we as Germans know. A Canadian person doesn't know what the Russian Quarter is. Also because society is structured differently. It's not like there are these Turkish quarters, it's like there's a little Italy, and it's much more charming in a way, right? So I explain these things, and then of course what has been a huge aspect I needed to explain was Vlado's past, because in the German version we find that Vlado is from the former Yugoslavia, that he experienced the wars in the 1990s. It's not we do not learn which war he was in. In the Canadian version, we know that he was in the Croatian War. And in Germany also we learn that he has a Serbian heritage. But then in Canada, people say, well, you got to be more precise. So he has a Croatian mother and a Serbian father. He considers himself Serbian because his father is still alive, his mother isn't. And of course, that tension with his mother having been Croatian and his father having been Serbian and them having lived in Croatia is what makes for the trauma that he's experienced as a young boy and the things that happened to his mother. So the Canadian version gives more answers. I learned a lot more about my play than I learned when I had written it in Germany. People ask questions in Germany, they're like, this is fine, give it to us, we're gonna put it on stage. In Canada, they're like, why did you do this? And you're suddenly like, I don't know. So yeah, is that somehow an answer?
Yeah, it's perfect. That's part of the initiative of German Stage is to introduce these German playwrights and voices from Germany, from the German theater to American audiences. And the scripts that we choose are always something that has a universal theme, is culturally specific in some way, and from my point of view, emotionally driven. Otherwise, it's just not interesting. It's just not a piece of theater. And so we thought this was a perfect combination for German Stage, because it was definitely very culturally specific, the one that we did, and the format is so different from your average show that you would see at any of the theaters here in town that are much more linear. So when you go to the German theater, they're more adventurous in their format and structure. Are there any questions from the audience?
Sorry.
I'll give you one.
I'm curious, watching it reminded me of short little film snippets almost, which I was very intrigued by. And I'm wondering, who is your influence in the theater? You know, example for me would be Grotowski, so I was wondering who really makes you tick.
It's the thing, it's always very hard to pinpoint your influences, right? Because of course, as a playwright, you read a lot, and then you let things happen. So I realized, and I think you said about it being being very filmic in a way. It's very true, and that's in a way how my mind works, right? And I think many of us have that our minds go to these places where we see somebody doing something, and then we're reminded of something else, and it's all these associations we have. I must say what helped me as a playwright, and I mean this is maybe it's cliche, but once I read the works of Sarah Kane, was a British playwright, and some people call it the in-your-face movement. In-your-face movement is a stupid idea, and even Alex Sears, who invented it, doesn't like it anymore, right? Because it groups playwrights in a way that they don't necessarily deserve. But what Sarah Kane does is that she takes structures and she breaks out of them. And eventually, over the course of a couple of plays, she comes to a play like Crave, which has quotes from T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, and where she builds this collage of a play, and still it's very emotional. But you, as a director or as a reader, when you're approaching it, you have to figure out who's talking, why they're saying that, who they're saying it to. So you have to figure things out, and you have to find your way through, which is probably, I guess, a bit of the process that you guys were going through with my play, because I don't write any stage directions. I don't say so-and-so says to so-and-so. They've got to figure that out themselves. And then it's also that the section today opened with this poem, which is Nis Randas by Otto Ernst Schmidt, which is a German poem that I use throughout the play. So I'm going to a poet, and I'm using his words because I'm sort of out of words at that point, or Vlado's out of words. How is he to explain a trauma? And I guess that's something that I've taken from reading Sarah Kane, where she goes to T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land to sort of say the unspeakable in a way. And then And here with Nies Randers, and I think people who are German, or like my parents' generation, like everybody knows this poem, which is about a young man who rescues a stranger from a sinking ship, and turns out it's his brother. So he goes out and he knows, I'm going to save a stranger, and and I put my life into danger, and then it's his brother he rescues, and that's sort of about his journey. So to come back to your question, who are my influences? That is for me something which is very, very hard to say. And I was asked that question when I won the Kleist Promotion Award. People said, "So what's your connection to Heinrich von Kleist?" And I said, I'm utterly critical about society, right? But I think what is, of course, something that influenced me is that in German theater you're allowed to do many, many things. And here's the truth about this play. When I send it to the people at the Kleist Promotion Award, I send it to them to, excuse my French, to piss them off. Because I said, I'm not going to win an award anyway, because what I write is not what people want to see. So I'm sending you this play, and at the time it was 150 pages long, and you got to read it. You got to make sense of that. And then they liked it, which then they bring me up and say, so, and I said, what? How could this happen? But that again is something that speaks for the German dramaturgs who will give, or like theater makers who are giving away that prize, saying, well, this is new, this is something which is going beyond what people have done before. So it's in German theater, I think if you do the thing that, which you feel is in a way insane, it can work. And in that way, people who have done insane stuff have inspired me, right? If you have a theater tradition where people can just stand on a stage and insult the people in the audience, it can be very, it can be very inspiring. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right here.
I have a limited experience with German theater as it is staged in the United States. But a few experiences as a viewer that I had played a lot with a shock value. So that would be Lessing's Emilia Galotti modernized, or Ibsen's Ibsen's play in which at the end Nora shoots her husband with submachine gun. So it always seems like there is this very blunt, or in this few examples that or experiences.
Needs to come back and shoot the director.
So is this what you say is a typical approach, and how do you see yourself within that approach to the audience?
Yeah, I know that approach to theatre, and I feel shock can be a form of catharsis, surely, but it not always is, right? So I don't want to see myself in that tradition, because I feel at the moment we shock people, we alienate them in a way, and that's not what we want to do. Of course, you can find yourself through a process of alienization, but that is even a word. But I feel, and that's sort of more the tradition I see myself in, humanity itself, without Nora grabbing the machine gun and shooting her husband. We can find humanity itself can be shocking, and what's in this play is sort of that I say, what is very shocking about this play, and I think that certainly is Vlado's past, because we can see him go to places that to some of us would be like places we wouldn't go to, when he pulls out his knife and he holds it to a man's throat and says, "Where's my friend?" Like we would maybe shove a person, like, "Tell me where my friend is." He doesn't do that. He doesn't do that for one particular reason, but I don't precisely say why. And then when our imagination comes in, I think we're in a spot where we can imagine, or where we allow to feed in something that is personal, that is us, in order to understand. And that is how I feel we relate to a character on stage. When he grabs a machine gun, who relates to a person who grabs a machine gun? But if we see a person who is lost, who doesn't know how to do that next step that he's supposed to do, and helplessness grabs him and shakes him, that's when we see a human being. And that's what we are. We are human beings, and we have situations in our life where we feel helpless. We may not react the same way, but that's a point of connection, which is why I feel theater that goes to extreme places has to justify, I feel, could justify it in the way that it says, well, look, this is what you could do as the person in the audience. But once it loses that, I think it's a spectacle, and spectacle's great, and German theater is great spectacle, and I love it for that. But I feel the notion of feeling or truthfulness is sometimes missing. That one notion that connects back to us in the audience and tells us, well, this play is about me in a way too. It's not to shock me and then say, I shocked you. It's about, who are you? What would you do? You don't need to tell me because it's your journey. That's why you're allowed to sit in the audience and just be in that like space. How I feel. Yeah.
I'm wondering what the distinction is in your process, in your mind, between translation and the development of the play or of yourself as a playwright. When you call the Toronto version a translation of the German version with sort of cultural changes, I wonder if that means that the next time you write a play in German, you'll be likely to use the German technique that you used in Brandung Abyss. And then if you translate it to English, you will again think about the questions that you've been thinking about in drama as it's played out in North America. Or will this now change the way you write also, the way you think about drama in German?
The odd thing is that, of course, it changes things, right? Because when I came to Canada, I learned things about playwriting that I hadn't known before. And I mean, I should maybe give you a bit of background information, because in German universities, it's not common to be taught creative writing. It's not a course in universities. So if you want to become a playwright in Germany, you can go to the University of the Arts in Berlin, and they take 8 people every 2 years. And that's people who are professional playwrights. I didn't go there, so I'm not a professional playwright. So for me, all the things I learned about playwriting was basically taking literature in university. We have my literature courses, but it wasn't about me writing. So when I came to Canada, people said, well, look, your play could also have an inciting incident. It could also, it has a climax, but Brandung in the German version is like admittedly missing an inciting incident that happened 3 days before the play starts. The Canadian version doesn't. It's in there. I wrote a couple of new scenes. So now for me, when I write my next play, or when I write now, it's very hard to let that go, because I'm always like, where's my inciting incident? It should be in the first 5 pages, and if it's not there, people don't want to read my play, right? So I'm on page 20, this is going to happen on page. So that is actually something that puts me in that position where I write differently, right? Because Brandung doesn't have any writing technique to it, I must admit. But I should also say it helps me, because with Brandung it has taken, or with Abyss, it has taken us 1.5 years to get to that point where it eventually is a play, in the sense of Aristotle, or play, or like things should be, right? So right now I take my knowledge that I have from Canada, but still what I do is I write intuitively. I can't do it differently. And at one point I said, well, had I learned to be playwriting in North America, I wouldn't be a playwright today, because I would be too scared of playwriting. Because in Germany I could just go and do it, and it's not a profession, right? It's because I haven't been to Berlin. I'm not a professional playwright, so there's no pressure to it. But in Canada, of course, there is, and that's what I tell my friends when they go like, oh, wow, it's so hard to be a playwright. It's not. Don't think about it. And later on, once you've written your play, go about and find the inciting incident. If it's not there, edit, and then it's going to be fine. So it's a very important question for me right now, because that's something that I'm negotiating deep inside myself. How do I do that? How do I write a play now, with having all that knowledge and having people around me who can help me with precisely that, but still leaving that all aside and writing a play that's just sort of my heart and not my head.
I had a question about some of the cultural translation. So even returning to the question of the Russian Quarter, I wonder, so what is the equivalent in Toronto Is there like a high-rise area? And then the other thing I was wondering is, it seems really important that the central character is traumatized by the wars in Yugoslavia. Do Toronto audiences know that? Do Canadian audiences? Would they grasp the gravity of that? Or, you know, how did you deal with that specific issue?
It's a very good question. It's something that I've been working on for a long time now, because it's not like there's a Russian Quarter, because in Toronto, at least it's not the same connotation, because the Russian Quarter in the, like where I grew up in Germany, it's that area where the police doesn't go, right? The Russians rule it. Which is safe if you're Serbian, right? But if you're not, so that doesn't exist. Of course, we have areas like Jane and Q, which is a very poor neighborhood, which is a dangerous neighborhood. But it's not like the same. It's not like it's about nationality, right? It's about where you are in society, as sad as that is. So what I do is that we refrain from setting the play in Canada, taking it to Canada, right? Because you can't find analogies. But then I said, no, let's not do that, because they're driving to Croatia, right? They get in the car and they drive to Croatia, and that's where the seas, that's where the rivers go. So we said, we just leave it in Europe, and we explain more. So just to give you an example, and this is precise about Vlad's history. There is a moment in the play, in the German play, where he just points out to his love, to the narrator, that over there on the island is the old house, and the clothing is still in the cabinets, and he hears her screams, his mother's screams, coming to him over the ocean. That's what the German play says. The Canadian play says, over there is the house. And then he goes back to when he was 12 years old, when he opened the door and the neighbors came in, 5 men, and it was the fathers of the kids he went to school with, and they were holding knives in their hands, and he heard his mother, it's giving me goosebumps, being in the kitchen, and she was making pancakes, and his glass of milk was still standing on the table, and he saw the man going into the kitchen, and his father calling from the shore by the boat, saying, run, and his mother shouting, run, and he just ran, and that was the last time he saw his mother. Then when he reached the other side of the shore, when he sort of paddled from the island to the mainland, he saw his house burn. And he heard his mother's screams echo to him over the waves, over the ocean, and he still hears them today, which is way more intense, which explains the precise problem. It's a 12-year-old boy who opened the door to the murders of his mother. And then it's explained that the reason was because the woman married a Serbian man. But that is not a place where I wanted to go in the German play. It's not a place where I feel comfortable as a playwright. Because I don't want to write black and white. I didn't want to write that Croatians went to kill a Croatian woman who was married to a Serbian, because I don't think there's black and white in this world. So I felt and I still feel very uncomfortable about having that scene in my play. But it's something that has to happen in order for people to understand what's going on inside Vlado. And once you hear that, it makes sense that there's a young man who's now in his early or mid-30s who's suffering from severe PTSD. Because that's simply what it is.
I think it's a question of what, of how much trust and belief an artistic director and a dramaturg and a theater puts in their audience. So, do we create theater that says, here it is, here you go, it's understandable, it's packaged? Or do you say, here, figure some stuff out? And in general, I'm sad to say, North American theater is more of the packaged theater than a German theater. That being said, what Maria said before about the German theater lacking the emotional truth, I think that's also true. But there's always an interesting element to the translations that we get to see what, whether it works for a local audience.
Yeah, I think I should add, because is there a time issue? Because when it's just this thing, it's people always ask me what's better, North American theater or German theater, and there is no better or worse. It's very different, right? And it's like, North America you have a turkey for Thanksgiving, in Germany you don't. It doesn't mean that turkey is the wrong thing to have for Thanksgiving. It's just some people like it, some don't. So, and I think that's part of the issue. It's a tradition. It's a tradition that's grown, and I think it's a tradition that's grown in a society that still goes back. And this is something we don't have in Germany. We don't go back to our old dramatic texts like you with Shakespeare and be true to Shakespeare, which is such a wonderful thing to go back to Shakespeare and say, what did Shakespeare mean in Germany? You'd be like, I don't understand it. I'm just going to cut it. Right, so I think it's about how you treasure writing, and it's also how you treat the author, right? It's like how you respect that.
Can I just have one follow-up thing or no? When you say that, it makes me think of when I saw Rock and Roll on Broadway. I don't know if anyone's seen the Tom Stoppard. So it's like this whole history lesson, the pamphlet. I mean, I knew that stuff already, but it was like amazing how much they felt they had to explain. And even how didactic the play is, there's a lot of explaining. But then if you go to a small theater, not Broadway, you can get some really weird stuff. I think that that's still true, but it's not big time. It's much, much smaller. It's hard to survive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Maria, very much for being here. It was a wonderful conversation. And thank you also to Stacy, Omar, and Mariana for performing.